The voice of radio takes our imagination to faraway places, transforms our mood with music, and brings us news and information. And radio does it without wires, without borders, almost magically, on electromagnetic waves transmitted invisibly through the air. For more than 100 years, radio has saved lives at sea, gathered families together,
Kid, everything's shipshape.
admitted sports fans to their favorite game, warned of impending danger, sent the truth into captive nations, and hope to the oppressed. Since 1942, Voice of America has broadcast the truth to millions trapped in fascist, communist, and other totalitarian regimes. Known to many as the official voice of the United States, the Voice of America is a grand testimony to radio with its miraculous power that opens hearts, leaps all boundaries, and doesn't turn back at closed doors.
Yes, this is the Voice of America.
And the voice is still heard.
I escaped from behind the Iron Curtain.
This is one of the people we call defectors. One who lived for a time under communist dictatorship.
I gained the courage to escape by listening to your broadcasts. Only when you spoke did I realize that my chance to live a good life was only to be found in a free country where they honor human rights and the dignity of man.
In Czechoslovakia, in this atmosphere of oppression, the only moment of hope occurs when we hear the Voice of America.
Well, the difference between local news like Radio Moscow and the Voice of America was that Voice of America did report the facts and did report true facts. In the Soviet Union, airplanes never crashed and crops were always good.
The impact of VOA is tremendous. I would say if you ask anybody of my age in China, especially college graduates, everybody can echo on my point. VOA give them access to the outside world and also open the mind.
A building located in a farm field just north of Cincinnati became home to some of America's most important technological innovations and political history. This is a story and a building worth preserving. The Voice of America Bethany Station is tied to the history of wireless technology and broadcasting advances throughout the world. Until wireless, people received news and entertainment largely via the written word. And then, shortly into the 20th century, crystal sets, shortwave and AM radio connected people to the rest of the world in real time. Greater Cincinnati has played a significant role in the history of wireless communication due to the vision, creativity, and ingenuity of its people. In the early 20s, Cincinnati radio manufacturer Powell Crosley Jr. was building the first low-cost radio priced for the common man. Believing that the demand for radios would grow if more radio content became available, Crosley received a license from the Department of Commerce for an experimental radio station to operate at 50 watts. This station later became WLW. A fanatic about new broadcasting technology, Crosley continually increased broadcast capability with an ever-growing pool of listeners being entertained on their Crosley radios. In September 1922, WLW, the future Nation station, increased power to 500 watts. 3 years later, WLW became the nation's first 5,000-watt radio station. By 1928, at 50,000 watts, WLW was heard from New York to Florida. Then, in 1934, WLW began broadcasting at an unprecedented 500,000 watts. Cincinnati was right there with New York, LA, and Chicago in programming development and the popularization of radio. By the end of the 1930s, Cincinnati radio was originating over 30 hours of programming for the national networks. In fact, Cincinnati's roster of radio talent rivaled the national radio networks. Eddie Albert, Doris Day, the Ink Spots, Grandpa Jones, Durward Kirby, the Mills Brothers, Red Skelton, Fats Waller, Andy Williams, Rosemary Clooney, and many others. At that time, most AM radios had one or two shortwave bands that allowed radio signals to be heard over a very long distance. However, only 13 shortwave stations operated in the United States. By comparison, Germany had 68 shortwave stations, and Japan broadcast from 42. As Germany and Japan waged war in Europe and Asia, they used shortwave to blast their relentless message of racism, arrogance, and hate. Hitler took radio to a new level, using it as a highly aggressive instrument of propaganda, working to confuse, divide, and fragment the world. With the fall of France to the Nazis in 1940, American officials realized that a blitzkrieg of misinformation was as effective as tanks in conquering a country. So President Roosevelt created the Office of the Coordinator of Information. William A. Donovan and Robert Sherwood were hired. For the next few years, they would be responsible for America's overseas broadcasting as directors of several government offices. From the beginning, they rejected the idea of propaganda, believing that truthful information coming from the United States, with unmistakable American sincerity, would be most effective to the American effort. When America was attacked at Pearl Harbor, correcting the U.S. shortwave deficiency became an urgent strategic priority, articulated by FDR himself. The newly created Office of War Information, the parent organization of VOA, worked with Crosley Broadcasting's WLWO to begin beaming German, Spanish, and Italian language broadcasts. WLWO, O for overseas, was the most powerful shortwave station in the Western Hemisphere. WLWO broadcasters like Austrian-born Robert Bauer, who had narrowly escaped the Nazis, gave the Third Reich a dose of its own medicine when he precisely mimicked the Führer's speech. The effectiveness of these broadcasts was confirmed when the Führer himself referred to those Cincinnati liars. Next, President Roosevelt summoned the bigwigs of broadcasting to Washington for an emergency meeting to see who could build a super shortwave transmitter in the shortest amount of time. Cincinnati's Crosley Broadcasting was there because of its expertise with superpower transmitters and shortwave broadcasts. During a break in the meeting, Crosley President James Schaus called Chief Engineer R.J. Rockwell and asked if he could build 200-kilowatt shortwave transmitters. Rockwell's response? I don't know, but I will sure give it a hell of a try.
Schaus came back with a very simple one-page contract. We were to construct 6 200,000-watt transmitters, shortwave, 24 high-efficiency antennas to reach Europe, North, Central, South Africa, and East and Western South America. This is an unusual situation because 200,000-watt transmitters had never been built before. We acquired this 625 acres of land just west of the WLW transmitter site. This location was ideal. It was flat, safe from coastal attack, with adequate power available from both the Cincinnati and Dayton power companies.
While the Bethany Station was under construction, WLWO and other American-based shortwave stations carried the first words of the new Voice of America.
Unsere Stimmen kommen zu Ihnen aus New York.
This is a voice speaking from America.
A voice from America at war.
Our voices are coming to you from New York, across the Atlantic Ocean to London, from where they are relayed to you in Germany.
Today, America has been at war for 79 days.
Daily at this time, we shall speak to you about America and the war. The news may be good or bad. We shall tell you the truth.
Appointed by Robert Sherwood, John Houseman was the first director of the Voice of America.
Our first German broadcast was followed within a week by 3 similar shows in French, Italian, and English.
À travers l'Atlantique au peuple français.
L'America in guerra parla al popolo italiano.
From New York, calling the people of Europe.
We had a year. We built the building, built the transmitters simultaneously with the construction of the building, put transmitters in here before the roof was finished, finally got the first transmitter on the air 1 year after we broke ground.
In Bethany, Ohio, on a last year's cornfield, there stands tonight a forest of wires and towering poles. These towers, although far from the scene of military conflict, are powerful and effective weapons of war. At a moment's notice, they can be beamed on 24 different lands in 5 of the world's 6 warring continents. They are the siege guns of radio, the heavy artillery, guns of war that can hurl explosive facts against the enemy's weapons of lies and confusion anywhere in the world. They are also potential guns of peace that can be turned against misinformation and ideas that lead to war. The story which is being told tonight is a story well known to countless listeners in foreign countries, to oppressed peoples of the world, to many for whom listening is a matter of life and death. It is a story that deserves to be better known by Americans. It is a tribute to the men who have worked without credit and praise to make the voice of America strong.
Our normal work schedule was about 12 hours a day. But when there was a major military offensive, such as the Battle of the Bulge or the invasion of Normandy, we were here 24 hours. We never did go home. Slept on the floor.
It was the Voice of America broadcasting the truth into the heart of occupied Europe that helped hasten the end of World War II. Technology developed by the military during the war burst onto the American scene afterward. Television took wireless communications to a whole new level. Cincinnati television stations began broadcasting in 1948. A few years later, WCET signed on as one of the first educational television stations in the country. Cincinnati retained its stature as a broadcasting powerhouse, home to 3 major media conglomerates, Crosley Avco, Taft Communications, and Scripps Howard. While the post-war years saw TV going into more homes in the States, radio broadcasting from VOA was going into more homes around the world, in more languages than ever before, reaching a high of 47 different languages. America's attention turned again to the European continent when Winston Churchill declared,
"An iron curtain has descended across the continent."
It became apparent that the people behind the Iron Curtain were being denied access to the truth. Almost immediately, the Soviets began jamming the VOA signal.
We could change frequencies, we could change broadcasting bands, as well as all the other stations could do the same. So we could do a frequency hopping effort in order to evade jammers.
Through the ensuing decades, with the Iron and Bamboo Curtains, through the Korean conflict and the war in Vietnam, Voice of America continued to broadcast news and words of encouragement from the Bethany relay station to millions around the world.
And VOA also believes that a well-informed people can be a very important force for peace.
Tyrannical rulers, dictators, and despots did not want the Voice of America message heard. Still, many risked their livelihoods, homes, even their lives, to listen to VOA broadcasts.
It was in 1959 when I first listened to the Voice of America. I was 13 years old. My dad kind of told me, "They are all lying, turn the radio off." As I say, well, I turned the radio off, but I didn't stop listening. Changed my mind about what's going on in the world. Really turned me into an anti-communist. Ultimately led to the defection to the West with my family.
We had a group of high government officials come from the Ukraine and express the fact to us that they had clandestinely, secretly listened to the Voice of America for years, and had they ever been found out that they were listening to Voice of America, they would have been fired instantly in disgrace from their government positions. However, they felt they could not trust their local news, and so they had to listen to the West to get a balanced story.
When I grew up, everything was controlled by the government because it was communist regime. So I remember my parents and my aunts and uncles who listened to Voice of America on the radio, but they had to hide them, and they had to turn it on very quietly so that nobody could hear them listening to it. I was here for Leadership 21 program, and we were listening to the tour guide and going through the history of Voice of America. And at that time, it kind of clicked with me. I was like, is this the Voice of America, which, in Russian it's Голос Америки. I really got pretty emotional. I think I actually teared up a little bit because it was unbelievable to me that I was in that place, that it was the place that the news was transmitted from. It was the place that helped my family understand that there's a whole world out there.
Guards patrolled the Bethany complex until the fall of the Iron Curtain. And despite all the cutting-edge radio technology housed at Bethany, it never contained a single microphone. Why? To protect from enemy agents seizing control of the Bethany transmitters and sending their message to the world in a matter of minutes. Today, the Cold War is over. The Iron Curtain, gone. And yet there are still subnational, tribal, ethnic, and religious conflicts that threaten peace and stability around the globe. VOA's ability to communicate ideas, ideals, and truthful information remains an important part of American foreign policy. Though the fight is still waged with words of truth, VOA now delivers them via FM, satellite, and cellular. So in 1995, with new technology and diminishing defense budgets, the federal government decommissioned VOA's Bethany Station. Bethany beamed its final broadcast on November 14, 1995, when at 1 p.m.,
we'll throw a switch and the tubes of the mighty Crosley transmitter will go dead forever.
The building went silent.
And we all gathered in the control room. We had everybody come in and we sang, God Bless America.
The landmark towers that sent the truth around the world for over 5 decades came down soon after. Yet the building still stands as a testimony to the engineers and managers of Bethany Station who accomplished something that had never been done before in a span of time no one thought possible at a pivotal moment in world history. VOA's Bethany Station is a tale of great engineering prowess and determination set against the human drama of totalitarianism versus freedom. This is a thrilling story, worth preserving, an adventure rich with patriotism, geopolitical intrigue, wartime strategy, incredible feats of engineering, and good old Yankee ingenuity. Combine the legacy of Voice of America with Gray's history of wireless collection and the compelling heritage of Cincinnati broadcasting, and you have a wealth of pioneering technology, innovative entertainment, and other material that must live on. It is the story of America's voice.
Lend me your ear.